an emotional person, and stereotypically, that's not an attribute that's uh, afforded to men, or not contra what they'll say about men of masculinity is like guys just compartmentalize and they box their emotions.
Yes.
I don't know what compartmentalization is.
Why must it be the hand clapping in our hand?
100%.
Why must it be a side hand? Like,
100%.
what if I just want to embrace you as my
100%.
brother?
100%.
Why do I feel uncomfortable in doing that?
This is what I'm meant to be, or what's expected of me, whatever. And so, indeed. But then, it's up to me then again, do I reinforce this way of thinking or not? What do I think about when I think about masculine? It's like, well, I thought it was one thing at a particular age, but over time, I feel like the term is not as descriptive as it used to be.
There's a part of me that feels like this is not okay. What is that part? Now let's figure that out. Why am I feeling uncomfortable yet at the same time I'm realizing how I like that?
Wait, this is something that's been given to me, but I still have a choice of how I engage with what's given to me, right?
Why should I love sports? What if I don't?
The idea of liking soccer and going, screaming at the TV screen, thinking it wasn't my reality. And so I had to wrestle with the idea. I'm like, wait, what is that? Where does that leave me?
Mojo.
What's that mean?
I'm good and how you doing?
Good, thank you.
At this point, I feel like I was thinking about it right now over here. And I'm like, I don't know. And this is just me in my own thoughts and just dreaming. I'm like, I don't know if it gets, how do I top this off? And I feel like with each episode is like, okay, how do we top it off from here? Because it's almost like it's kind of just elevating and like honestly, you are one of the greatest minds that I personally know.
Wow.
Like I've said this to you before, like how you articulate yourself, how you think, your view on certain things, and the intentionality even with your words. And you always lead with a lie. And when Mike and I would laugh and always say, we come to Mojo the problem, he's gonna ask you so many questions. Like he's gonna lead with so many questions, and in those questions and in that discussion, you'll find your way into that space. So I don't know if you ever consider peer review as a profession, because therapists are usually those people who ask questions instead of just feeding you the answer. They kind of guide you to you finding the solution, and that's what I've always found whenever we have our chats and hangouts. It's like you ask a lot of questions, you lead with a why a lot, and just getting context. And just helping the person to explore and think, have you thought of this?
Sure.
And why do you think that person is thinking like this? And it's just interesting. So really, it's like one of the greatest ones. Like I'm remembering there was this conversation the interview I was watching. There was a conversation rather than an interview between Simon Sinek and Trevor Noah. And Trevor Noah was just saying like how I can't remember the term that he used, some analogy that he used of how he relates and how he views Simon Sinek as a friend in his life. And I'm like, when he said that, I was like, yeah, that is Mojo. That's in my life. It's like you challenge thinking, you challenge a way of thinking, a way of maybe viewing things or handling or taking on certain things. Like so, in such a tremendous way. So yeah, I just have to put that out there. It's really
that's very kind. Thank you. That's such a kind welcome to the couch, to this space. I'm really encouraged by what you're saying. I don't know if I do it intentionally. Yes, no. And as you say, intentionality does matter to me. But I suppose I'm a very curious person by nature in a lot of ways, and so I think thinking is fun. Maybe in some respects it isn't, but whatever part I can play to perhaps explore people to explore, I do think it's meaningful. It can be helpful. So thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Awesome. So today's one is a really interesting one. I'm interested to explore this topic with you. Mainly because we've touched on it, and I think we share some sentiments around it as well. There's certain views that we actually share regarding this topic, and so I want to talk around masculinity today. And I was looking at the definition for masculinity, and it's saying it's qualities or attributes regarded as characteristics of men or boys.
Yes.
That is how I felt in the
Yes.
And I realized actually, even now I'm realizing that it's actually, I'm thinking like for myself personally, I think it's more, it affects me, this whole topic of masculinity, it affects me more than I actually thought.
Sure.
Like I knew that it affected me in a certain way.
Yes.
But in preparing for today's conversation, I was like, actually, this goes a bit deeper. Like, there's a lot that would come up in us realizing. So I don't know like how to even start it, but the first question I think I'll throw is what comes to mind
Yes.
to you when you hear the word masculine? What are some thoughts and feelings that are forward?
100%. I love that you actually open up with definition. So I mean, I love words. I think words mean stuff. Um, and when I was thinking about, okay, what does the word masculine mean? So my first instance was the stereotypical idea of what a man is or slash should be. And I mean, we'll probably unpack that as we go. But I guess some of the notions of it were, burly and strong and, just and this particular stereotype, so to speak. So those were, I suppose, the first things that came to mind. But then, as I'm thinking about it, it's just like, okay, but then that's according to whose definition of masculine, which then evolved to, okay, but then which part of society are we looking at? So, for example, again, my frame of reference, I suppose, is maybe what I was exposed to, or what I was, growing up with, and all that kind of stuff, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But then I was thinking, like, the more I've come over time, I guess, to learn and to realize and to see, say, look, maybe the idea of masculine in a lot of ways is painted by a Western perspective in one sense, but then the other ideas of us being in Africa is what I've been exposed to here, right? So maybe it's a mixture of those sorts of things. And I mention this to say, like, when I think about the idea of potentially maybe more in the East, right? So, for example, the idea of let's say Korea, and maybe just what are masculine ideas there, so to speak. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in this topic at all. What I'm saying is that, but now there are traits there that are slightly different to, for example, the West. So then it goes back to the question that, what do I think about when I think about masculine? It's like, well, I thought it was one thing at a particular age, but over time, I feel like the term is not as descriptive as it used to be.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you now read that definition that you did, because even what you said, paraphrasing now, you say these are attributes that are applicable to a man or a boy.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. It's just pointing to a particular gender. That's all it is.
Yes.
But as to what those attributes are, that's still quite open ended, right? So, sorry, I'm belaboring the point, but it's just to say that what I thought, I guess, at one stage, or initially, the more I think about it, the more it becomes less concrete, less descriptive. Which I think is a cool thing that's just so off my head. But yeah, I don't know. How about you?
Like, yeah, I'm thinking about again about what you're saying. I viewed it was shaped by my environment. I remember a person, which Sponi Suleiman, he one talk was giving and he was saying something that was quite profound, that he said, our truths are based on our worldview.
Yes.
And we all have a different worldview based on our circumstances and how, where we come from, what we've been through, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's very difficult, and it's almost naive to come and challenge what someone says and outright say, no, that is true, or no, that is just completely wrong. Because what we need to actually do to be able to engage better is to understand what is your worldview.
100%.
What are the lenses that you view the world? So then you can better understand why is it that you think of it a certain way. So it made me like really be very intentional when it comes to like critiquing and like criticizing people's views and having opinions about what a person says, because now I need to try and really understand well, where's your worldview? in this
100%,
case? Like,
yes.
what is actually motivating you to see it in this way?
100%.
And so to say what you like, to your point that you're saying that it's also in terms of the environments we're in. You were mentioning like the West and how it's also been maybe West influence, and I agree to that. And what I've also looked at as well, there's these traditional standards as well of morality. Just to list a few, they say these attributes: don't cry, show no fear, physical strength, professional success, breadwinner at home, dominance in relationships, assertive, the appearance. These are the things: independence, self-reliance. These are some of the traits that they say are pointing towards masculinity.
100%.
And for me, looking back and pretty much even still some of them, I find them still kind of being influential in how I carry myself. These are some of the standards and the attributes that kind of were passed down and I saw
Yes.
that you're dominant, you're strong, you don't cry.
Yes.
You don't show emotion.
Yes.
That to me means that you're a man.
Yes.
You play sports or you have an interest in sports. You maybe view women in a certain way.
Yes.
And again, being shaped by that community, the people that I'm surrounded by, maybe even the men around, or even the lack of. So that's been how I had to look at it, and then having to grow up and becoming more independent and more independent thinker. Because something I've realized is that, just to digress, it was just that in our younger ages and high school particularly, and going over crossing over to university, our thinking is not as independent. It's still kind of dependent on our parents. We still kind of think from their opinions and what the values and how they've raised us. So coming now over to university, especially if you're going to move out of the house, now you start finding your own independence. You build and shape up your worldview.
Yes.
And you start maybe questioning a lot of things. And why I went through that, and then going through that, I realized, well, why this doesn't seem right.
Yes.
Yes, I'm finding myself gravitating to it more mainly because this has been 18 years of my life. But now I'm having to question like, why should I love sports? What if I don't? Why should I be a muscular, strong person?
Yes.
Well, why should I have to emulate a certain way? Why should I view women in this perspective? And then having to also question the opposites of it,
Yes.
what would maybe not be deemed as masculine, and say, but what if I actually enjoy that?
And
Like, what if I actually like that? Like, for one example for me, which was very personal, and I had to do a journey on, was I'm an affectionate person. And I had to do that journey of understanding why do I find it difficult to express my affection to other men that I regard as friends, brothers. Will it be, the comforting hug? Why must it be the hand clapping in a hug? Why must it be a side hug? Like,
100%.
what if I just want to embrace you as my
100%.
brother?
100%.
Why do I feel like uncomfortable in doing that? So I
Yes.
had to explore that and understand that.
100%.
Another great one was I remember one of my first few Sundays when I just joined church. I was new to Johannesburg, and during the word, I can't remember who was preaching, but they reference a scripture in First Samuel from the first Samuel of where David and Jonathan kiss. And immediately in my head, when I heard that, quote in the Bible, I thought, okay. And immediately, after even thinking and saying, oh, that's gay, I was like, why? Why am I saying this is gay? This is the Bible, and this is what I'm gonna. It doesn't necessarily. It's not pointing to it being an immoral thing that they did, but it's actually speaking of it as this is how much they love one another and had this close relationship together as friends. So why is my position on this to say, oh no, that's gay? And I had to then do a work to kind of understand that, So it's been shaped like that, and I think I'm still in that process of trying to, break it down and understand it. Like I was saying, it's pointing to a certain idea, but it doesn't seem like there's a concrete definition to say this is what it is. And people, cultures, certain, depending on locations and whatever, are having to weigh in
Yes.
and say, well, we do this, well, we see it like this, and the culture the background, whatever, it's going to say the family, it's going to say something like this. So it looks like it's just being shaped based on a demographic, based on certain individual or people.
100%.
So I'm having to understand that, okay, what does it look like for me? And
100%.
also, how is it in space when I can say this is healthy?
Yes.
So I'm having to also understand that just because it might look this for me doesn't mean if it was different from another person, then it's not masculinity.
100%.
I don't know if that answers.
No, it does. You said a lot in all that, and if I may tag on to a few things you mentioned there, my throw out a question to you as well. Is one of the things you mentioned, you talk about the idea of having to reflect, or you're prompted now to think further, which I appreciate. I think it's something that's necessary. But it sounds like you also have a recognition that, wait, this is something that's been given to me, but I still have a choice of how I engage with what's given to me, right? More or less, if I understand you correctly. But not everybody necessarily does that. So one of the things I'm curious about is, okay, but what prompted that way of thinking in the first place? Because like one of the things I believe is that I believe that we are a product of both our experiences and our choices.
Yeah.
So whereas our experiences, we might not necessarily have control over what we experience / what is put upon us. The aspect that we have a little bit more control over is that the decision, right, that is linked to that particular experience. So now, using that analogy or this principle is, here you are in society. Society is bestowing this particular thing upon you, and you experience it as such. But then now you are left with deciding whether or not you subscribe to the school of thought, or for how long, or whatever. And it sounds like you have decided, or at least something happened in some stage, to interrogate and then say like, but no, I don't have to absorb this, or why am I? So, and you say it as if it's a given, like I had to do this, I had to think about it, whereas other people don't necessarily.
Yeah.
So I guess my question, one of the things I'm curious about is what triggered that, or where did that come from? Because I think that's a necessary thing. Because I think in understanding that, I completely agree with you, like the notions of affection is something that I cannot show because this is what is expected of a man again. But then it's just like, no, but that's according to what's been given to you / a worldview or societal expectations, which if you stop to think about it, you have the opportunity to ponder and be like, wait, I agree, I don't agree. So I'm of the same sort of thought. Just to expand, I know I need to let you answer the question, but to say I had to ask myself a lot of similar questions and experiences where I'm like, wait, I don't feel like I fit this particular mold. So for example, the whole sportsman-like thing. Growing up, I was just like, the idea of liking soccer and going, screaming at the TV screen, thinking it wasn't my reality. And so I had to wrestle with the idea. I'm like, wait, where does that leave me?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of these traits that are attributable to masculinity, which I can't identify with, it became a journey for me. I'm like, I don't quite know what to make of this. And I'll talk about the traits thing just now because it reminds me of something else. But I do want to give you the opportunity. Sorry, to answer the question.
Yes,
So,
yes. No,
what prompted the thinking? And
yes, and so like what you're saying, you find, I wish it would be true for everyone that people can get to that place where they like question. I've been raised a certain way. I have these values and these principles and these things that I say I live by.
Yeah.
But actually question, why am I actually doing this? But finding, like as we're saying, it's not the reality for this and this. And for me, I realized it was a realization of I'm not fulfilled with myself. So that was the trigger of just me questioning a lot of things, and I was just where I'm not happy in my own skin, I'm not happy with myself. And I don't think I want to live my life like that.
Yes.
Why? Another thing, like it was layered. There's people pleasing. Why am I doing this a lot? Why am I finding myself trying to fit into all these different spaces, having these different personalities so that I can please this crowd, and then I can conform with this crowd and then find acceptance with this different crowd. Like it was quite hectic much to the point where I subconsciously, my accent will change depending on the group I'm with.
Yes. Yes.
And I know it's really, I've seen it now later on, just, like I'm quite an analytical observer. I'm a keen observer of just a lot of things. And I've picked up a lot, particularly within the Black culture,
Yes.
specifically when it comes to English.
Yes.
With maybe your own peers or family members or fellow Black people, the dialect is different, the accents of English is different.
Yes.
But in maybe a working environment or space, maybe the way predominantly it's white people, the English changes.
Yes. Yes.
It becomes almost like a private school English.
Yes. Code switching.
You know, the code switching, yes. So like just that's a little example. I was just like that. If I am with colored people, my English is gonna.
Yes.
If I'm with Indian people,
yes.
And even now I have to be very conscious of it. I haven't
Yes.
fully gotten over, but I'm very conscious now when I'm speaking to people. What is my English like?
Yes.
Like to every literally all different nationalities. I'm with other African nationals.
Yes.
It's gonna sound a different way. So I had all these different layers: people pleasing, avoiding conflict, trying to fit in, and I'm like, okay, but who am I? And what do I like? So I had to explore and say, what do I love? What do I enjoy? And some things I would discover along the way, some things I'm still discovering even today. Like, I actually love this. I'm actually not a big fan of this. Like, just take an example of the sports thing. I have a team I support. And the way it came about, it was like, I had this group of friends and they love the Premier League a lot. And I was like, let me see, I haven't really watched Premier League. The most soccer I had been exposed to at that point was the South African league. So I was like, let me just have a look and see what team I support. And it just so happened the first game I watched was an Arsenal game. And to be honest, I really enjoyed the way they were playing as a team.
Yes.
Like I found it, I was like, this is so beautiful, chemistry and all of that, just the technical aspects. I was like, this is beautiful football I'm watching right now.
Yeah.
And then I just naturally was like, okay, I support this team. So it was just a by act of chance of this was the team that I saw playing when I switched to the first Premier League game I watched them and I just supported them. But within that, I'm not the person who's just gonna sit on a random day alone in my house and watch soccer. That's a very seldom thing. It's like it means I'm actually just trying to just sit and do nothing.
Yes.
And I don't really have anything to do. But
Yes.
I'm not gonna I have to ask myself that time, I'm gonna invest 90 minutes to watch grown men chasing around this piece of living.
Yes.
It didn't make sense to me, right?
Wow.
However, in a group setting
Yes.
where we're gonna have a cry, we're gonna get together as gents, and they're gonna be watching a game, we're watching a Champions League game. I enjoy that because it's not so much of the soccer for me.
Yes.
It's more of the community
Yes.
and the fellowship taking place
Yes.
as the gents and the friends in that space.
Yeah.
So in that case, I'm gonna enjoy it. Oh, we're gonna comment as well, and we're gonna. But it's more than that. It's not just about soccer. It's just one of the things that are also taking place in the setting. So I can watch it in that sense. Again, another one. I wouldn't mind going to a rugby stadium and watching a rugby game. Like one of the things I'm looking forward to, I'd love to watch the Springboks playing in Ellis Park.
Yes.
I'd love to see that. Hopefully they play in the All Blacks. But it's not necessarily about the rugby. It's about the experience. It's about the people that we're going with.
Yes.
So it's more of there are things around it. So the central thing isn't the sports itself. So that's just like with sports in the context of sports. So I've had to, it was triggered by that. It was triggered by me asking myself, what do I like? And realizing that I haven't been authentic to myself. And it, in a sense, it led to, I guess, an identity crisis. Not knowing who am I, what do I like,
Yes.
what do I enjoy, what I don't enjoy.
Yes.
So I had to then explore that. So it was triggered by that realization, and then the exploration took place. So like, okay, this is how I feel. But then that meant I had to be open. If I don't know, let me try that. Let me be open to them. Let me give it a fair shot, and then let me decide. Let me not just decide because it just puts me off. Let me actually give it a chance, and I can really have an informed decision to say, I like this. I don't like this. I don't subscribe to that thoughts, and I enjoy this. The whole affectionate thing. I realized it coming to Johannesburg, and it was in the church context, in the space of church. And I see these gents hugging each other in my security, like people who are my friends. I'd see them hugging each other, when they greet each other. And it wasn't just like that, and no, hugging and embracing each other. And I found myself rebelling from that. I was like, I like that.
Mhm.
And I hadn't been exposed to that
Yeah.
growing up. My context, my background, that was, I guess, taboo.
Yes.
You know, to say a male and a man hugging each other in that with that level of affection was taboo. So now seeing that, hearing him say, "I love him," and it's okay, and I've so much of love for that man. I like that, but there's a part of me that feels like this is not okay. What is that part? Now let's figure that out. Why am I feeling uncomfortable? Yet at the same time I'm realizing I would like that.
Yes.
So the stuff like that, I just have to do the gym of that.
Nice.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, it does very, very well. It sounds like there's a growing sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
That was a key part that was playing, that was at play, I guess, in what's going on. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's something that I personally believe that serves us well.
Yeah.
The greater your level of self-awareness, I suppose, the greater you have the opportunity to construct your own narratives, right? As opposed to just being reactionary to life, or being purely on the back foot or on the responsive side or reactive side, rather. So, yeah, that sense of self awareness is like, wait, hold up. Why this, why this? And then engage with it on a more intentional basis, right? Which is, I think, is cool. Like, piggybacking off of that, like, I remember one of the earliest examples for me in thinking about stuff that doesn't conform to the stereotypes. And again, it's not to say that I think it's important to acknowledge that the stereotypical characteristics or qualities, so to speak, I don't necessarily vilify them or say that they are bad. It's more, I think, the sense that the box that is meant that everybody is being conformed to or being put into. I think that's the challenge that we're navigating, so to speak. But high school. So I've got a dance background.
Yeah.
I enjoy dance. I'm creative in a lot of respects, and I thank you. And I love exploring that side of things. So therein, at least in my experience, the creativity and masculinity weren't necessarily spoken about in the same breath. So I found like, okay, cool. I lean more to the creative side than I do on the sportsy side, so to speak. So now there's already that dynamic. But then in like, particularly having a dance background at the time, so I grew up doing ballroom and Latin. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And thinking about it, like in high school, so wrestling with some of those things, as for example, be like, wait, uh, does does me doing dance, does it qualify as me as a masculine thing or not? And at the time, a lot of the rhetoric, or at least what I was coming across it in my circles, or what I was exposed to was this idea that not necessarily, which I found a bit odd to me because I'm like, well, if dancing or ballroom and Latin, you can't be a guy and do it. I'm like, but this is a male-female partnership, so there are tons of men in it. So there was already a disconnect. It's just like, but this does not make sense. So I think some of those things as well. It's just like, wait, I understand I'm being told this on the one end, or at least this is what I'm understanding or interpreting. But on the other side, I'm like, but the reality also is this doesn't make sense. And to one of the points that you made, which I really love, is the idea that, wait, if I am not being true to myself, or at least exploring, acknowledging the side of me, the part of me that is yearning for something or is more at ease with one thing versus the next, then I'm unsettled. That dynamic. I think was important, an acknowledgement of, hey, look, I have a proclivity to this, so I lean more towards this than towards that. And I find that if I'm not honest about it, then I'm unhappy or I'm dissatisfied. Then I think that's an important thing to acknowledge and to explore. So anyway, that's what I ended up doing as well. Similar things where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm a more emotional person, or at least maybe admittedly so, because I think all of us are emotional. It's just maybe your expression of it. I'm just like, well, I'm quite an emotional person, and stereotypically, that's not an attribute that's afforded to men. Or, not contra what they'll say about men of masculinity is like guys just compartmentalize and they box their emotions.
Yes.
I don't know what compartmentalization is. To be honest, I can listen to somebody talk about like, oh, this happened at home, and I can leave it there, and this happened. I understand the concept in theory. How do you do it? I don't know. It's not to say I can't control my emotions. It's just to say they're interwoven. So, so that dynamic, for example, is just like, okay, shucks, there's another thing I can't particularly relate to.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean? So, there's, but the more I've embraced, like, okay, this is how I am, this is how I'm wired. And in embracing how I am, it doesn't mean I can't grow. I'm not saying that. It's just to say, this is where I am currently, right? Way to from here. Well, it starts with acknowledging where I am and embracing it. So, anyway, that's just to
I love that particular one. I somehow, or maybe I was feeling myself, I was still very young. This is my high school years where I would tell myself that I am, I'm a person who, like you're saying, can compartmentalize to say, this happened at home, I can leave it here, I can leave this is whatever school stuff, I can, can just put things aside. But from now, this point where I am in life, and I look back at that, I think to myself, well, was I not being genuine and authentic? If I'm gonna come and show big smiles, but actually I'm hurting.
Yes.
And it's not to say now, because obviously there's elements of professionalism where you also need to show up in terms of the capacity that you need to show up in, whether it's a workspace, you need to come and deliver work.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily let whatever you're going through affect the productivities, right? So now I'm having to understand that there has to be that balance, there has to be that balance where, yes, life is real. Don't put things in a box and shove them to the side, because that's also not healthy,
Yes.
So there's a healthy way to do it. So now at this point, like I kind of resonate what you're saying. To say, I struggle with that thought of putting things aside. A friend of mine would say, he was very brutal. I'm sure friend of ours he would say, he said to me, for him, in his perspective, it was a compliment. And I was like, wow, I've never thought of it as a compliment. And I think from that point on, I then embraced it as such to say, maybe it is a strength. He said, what I love about him too is that what you see is what you get. He doesn't sugarcoat it. If he's not having a good day, you will know he's not having a good day.
Yes.
And so like to say what I was saying, like I kind of, I was intrigued by that, because I'm like, it's a strength, it's a positive.
Yes.
Because for me at least, I wouldn't necessarily want to now be on the back end of the receiving end of whatever another person's going through, that I'm not, directly responsible for, but now I'm to take on whatever, So and that's what I'm saying. I've had to also navigate to figure out how do I like maneuver this well to say, okay, I understand, okay, maybe I'm feeling a bit stressed or tired, or work is overwhelming right now, but I'm going to meet a friend and sit down with him. How do I be authentic with that to say, hey, this is how I am, but then the same time I need to affect the person and bring to that conversation and that setting? Can I still be a truthful person? Can I still be a person who it's nice to be around, and to have as company, even if I'm not, big smiles and laughs, because maybe I am feeling a bit fatigued and tired. But again, it's still like you can enjoy my company. That's what I'm saying. So I've had to navigate that space. But like to say that, I definitely understand. Like I now look at it, I'm like, it was healthy to box things and put them in compartments and say, no, I'll deal with that later. And that's how I told myself, maybe I was telling myself, but that's how I was operating 100% my younger years. 100%. And to kind of also to ask a question for a question, where something you're mentioning as well, like how I was talking about the certain influences in terms of the elements or the attributes that we say, okay, this is masculine, this is not. You mentioned something, even when we were talking about dance, take parts in dance and stuff. Would you say I think it's a two-part question. Would you say one thing that came to mind is the peer pressure, bullying. would you say that played a large role? Because I think that's what I've been in our conversation talking. I started asking myself to say, is this something that really hindered me from embracing what naturally comes to me and rather taking on what the Lord was teaching on to say, hey, because you're male, this is what you need to subscribe to. And I just kind of stood on it because I don't want to be seen a different way. I don't want to be treated a different way. I don't want to be labeled a certain way. And, in school, it's very privileged and it's kind of been normalized, bullying and teasing because you think different or you just kind of go in a different direction from what is the norm.
Yes.
Was that maybe something that affected you? And the second part to that is, how did it, if it did it affect the identity aspects of you saying, okay, this is what I need to do this.
100%. That's a good question. So let me answer it like from this angle, at least the peer pressure / bullying dynamic of it. So, as you're asking the question, so let's talk about culture for smidge for a little moment. But in talking about culture, like one of the ideas that I loved coming across, at least articulated really well recently, was this idea that culture shapes us, and we in turn shape culture, right? And all to say that the spaces we're in inform or greatly influence what we believe and what we take in and what we start to do, all of that. And inadvertently, we then produce the culture as well. So it's this interesting dynamic. So I'm saying this to say that be myself and find myself in a context, in a culture, in a society that says this is what is expected of me as a male, as a man, as a individual, so to speak. So of course that brings a sense of expectation that I am meant to subscribe to or that I'm meant to meet or whatever, right? So in and of itself, the idea of an expectation being there upon you is that it brings a degree of pressure.
Yes.
So yes, I would say that there is some kind of pressure that I felt because I'm aware that this is what I'm meant to be or what's expected of me, whatever. And so, indeed. But then it's up to me then again, do I reinforce this way of thinking or not? And that's not an easy thing. It's not necessarily an easy thing to navigate as a person, let alone a younger person, right? So yes, I'd say definitely I did feel those aspects of it. But then again, I suppose in me asking a question and be like, but why is this expectation? That I think became a little bit of a saving grace for me because I was just like, oh, but I don't get why this is here. And at least the way I'm wired, stuff needs to make sense. When you mentioned a little earlier about the why, I am that kind of person, but why is it like this? Or why must it be like that? And if that doesn't make sense, it becomes hard for me to follow suit in that regard. Maybe sometimes I might for while I'm figuring it out, but inevitably we're gonna run out of tarmac. There's just something's gonna give. And yeah, so there's that dynamic that I suppose I was facing, and I suppose in exploring that why, I rested or I came to a point I'm like, no, what is being expected of me in that regard doesn't make sense or is illogical. Therefore, I can't subscribe to that. And if I can't subscribe to that, then it's not for me. It became kind of that simple. And I think the more I thought about things in this respect, the easier it became to just be truer to what makes sense for me. So, in an effect, I suppose that's shaped my identity in certain respects. It did help, when you're exposed to other people that maybe think a similar way, or at least in particular way. So, for dance, I'm in dance, I'm in a dance environment. That's something I need to think about because, like-minded individuals, at least when it comes to this dynamic. And so you find places of relatability, I guess, that help reinforce my certain sense of identity. But then beyond that, so I'm a person of faith, and God is a big part of it's a foundation of just my belief system and my worldview, and recognizing that He's the one who informs who I am, how I am. / the word is what should give the idea of what a man is.
Yeah.
So that now becomes my primary reference point. And then within that entire scope, part of it, I suppose, what becomes important for me is I think of one of the scriptures that really challenges me is, and Psalm 139 talks about being fearfully and wonderfully made, marvelous are your works. That idea, and it's just like, wait, if I'm questioning something which God has put in me, and again, that I think is of course something worth exploring. The idea of, okay, God, is this something that you've put in here? So there's that dynamic to it as well. But I'm just saying, like, God, if it is you who has wired me this particular way, or has put this desire in my heart, or and I am questioning it, then do I believe the scripture that marvelous are your works? That I'm fearfully and wonderfully. So then, you understand? So then it comes back to, I'm like, wait, I need to just understand what's going on in this regard. And so I hope that answers both your questions. But yeah, the idea of my identity now is primarily rooted, at least I'm trying, growing to be rooted more in who God calls me to be than anything outside.
No, that's beautifully said. Like what you're saying, I was actually in preparation as well, just looking, okay, because like similar to you, that the word of God is foundational to my worldview, my belief, and just how I live my life. And so in preparation as well for today, I was just like, let me see what the Bible is saying about this and looking at it, and what was fascinating and interesting, which I think in many regards, in many topics in society, the Bible in some cases doesn't necessarily give a straight definition the way we want it in society, but rather it gives a idea or high level umbrella of like this is what it looks like. But then I guess it kind of leaves the canvas to us as people to say you can flesh it out, but maybe within these parameters or confines. And I was looking, like I said, I struggled with that definition I read earlier of masculine. I was like, particularly the attributes, characteristics. I'm like, that's giving. I don't know if I'm going to use like synonyms and maybe there are synonyms, but I don't know. Maybe you can follow my thought process. Like the traditional standards of masculinity that I read, they're not crying all of that for me. It's what to do and what to do per se. It's giving a tick box sort of. It's giving the virtues of it. But then something else which I found more fascinating, which to me it gave more of a virtue. Um, Whereas that list is not necessarily virtues, but it's like, I guess, behaviors. And here it was saying men who are truly masculine, they embrace responsibility, they love, they are protectors, right? They're honest, they provide for family, they live with integrity, and they're motivated by conviction, not comfort or convenience. And for me, I was like, these are virtues. This is giving. It's not necessarily saying do this, don't do that, love this, don't love that, but it's saying here are pillars that can guide you in how you outwork your life, your responsibilities, whatever you do, and how you walk in life. Can people point to you and actually identify these virtues? Can they identify these pillars, that you love, that you protect, that you are a person who takes responsibility, or you are these virtues that can be found in you? And I can find myself subscribing more to these, rather than do I cry, do I show emotion? Because we are different as individuals. Does it mean if I show emotion I'm less of a man? And to the other end of it, if we say, because there can be the other aspects where we shun all these things, but then does it mean the person who does not show emotion is something wrong with them? I wouldn't necessarily say, I don't think that's the case. Does the person who loves working out and they are just ripped, doesn't mean now you are, what do you call it today, toxic? That shouldn't be the case. So I found myself having to realize that, to say, well, maybe we need to change our reference or how we're framing it, rather than looking at the characteristics or the do's and do nots, let's maybe have the virtues that we can say this is something that universally we can say is admirable.
100%.
I think we can universally say, oh, a man who uses their strength not to protect but rather to inflict pain. I think we can universally say that's not a good thing. A man who wouldn't take responsibility can universally say, hey, maybe not. It's actually better to take responsibility. We can agree on those kind of standards. So I found that fascinating looking at it, and I think the question I'm leading to is to say, is it? Do you think it is also kind of there's an influence from the females? We spoke of it in terms of also just the peer pressure in society, but I want to look at females, and the reason why I want to kind of look at females is that as men, I think another stat I saw is that naturally we are creatures who want to please, particularly our counterparts, right? So then you then see in society, and even as of recent, you'll see some of these hashtags, you'll see some of these sayings like damas, and all of these kind of sayings. Do you think that's something that plays a role in influencing, these stereotypes of what a man is and what a man isn't?
Sure. So I think it's an interesting question to phrase that way, and I'd say, to say like, do females play a part in that? The answer would be, well, society is who shapes this expectation, and females are a part of society. So I think that, do they play a role? Of course they do, but in as much as men themselves also play a role, right? Because we are all society. I think perhaps some of the notions that are maybe more attributable, for example, well, in one sense, to the female would be like you just said, indota mas. Like again, but that also arguably depends on that female's worldview as well, because you might find one female saying, yes, a man must XYZ, XYZ, but then you'll find another female who doesn't view things in exactly the same way. So again, it comes back to who you're talking to, their environment, their context, as well, their outview, all that kind of stuff. So, I think your question definitely makes sense, and understand where it comes from, especially even when you say the idea of wanting to appease, wanting to please, or wanting to attract, or all these kinds of things. But then I could argue, or I would argue that but then the person who is responding to that particular expectation, they clearly believe that this is what must be done in order to attract that individual. So then, is it the external party's fault, or is it the person who is actually subscribing to that school of thought? Because, do you understand? So I think it's arguable on both sides. So it's not to avoid the question or to dance around it, to say that I think the answer is a little bit more nuanced than might be the case. I think what we've been saying this throughout as well in ways is to say, I think we need to be take account or be responsible for own our part in this entire dynamic, right? So yes, the external party might say you must, and again, maybe that creates a particular pressure. Sure. But then again, how did that person come to believe that in the first place? They are a product of culture / society, which they themselves need to question, but then you don't have to subscribe to it as well, right? Yeah, so it's a high level answer.
Definitely.
Overarching, I don't know if,
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's the thing, I think, of just also what I've just been saying, I think it shouldn't be so much as, how do I put this? It shouldn't be necessarily the thing of pinpointing and saying this is wrong, this is right. Yes, there are, at a high level, I'd like to think there is that clear in terms of this is wrong, this is right. But the more nitpicky areas in terms of interests, in terms of what we do and how we get in life, I'd like to say it's an each to their own.
Yes.
It is a thing of, it works in this context, it doesn't work in that context, and that's fine.
Yes.
And I think what has happened for a while, over the years, is that we've leaned to one extreme and we've kind of just accepted it maybe just accepting it as it is because it's been passed down to us like that, and because it's just generally accepted, we've just kind of taken it on like blindsided to say this is what it is,
Yeah.
and these are the attributes, and this is what it should look like. And if it's outside of these confines, then it's something else. And now I think we're finding ourselves having to wake up, and even society, like I was saying, we kind of like society shapes us and then we shape society, and you just see that cycle. And I think that's also what's happened over the years as well, with seeing all the different aspects that have happened, over the years, women empowerment, and all of these very real like causes that you see happening, and some of the shifts that are happening. It's because maybe we're trying to create, at least from where I'm looking at it, we're trying to create something that we looked at and said, but why is it like this? It shouldn't be the case. Where now we're finding more and more, we're becoming more comfortable with the idea and accepting of, hey, women can actually rise up in the workplace. Women can actually take the lead in their homes. Women can actually, they can be breadwinners in their homes, and it should be okay. And we're finding that we actually be coming to a place of acceptance of these different spaces. But again, I find myself, I have this fear of, and I think it's a thing because I've seen it in the past play out where in our attempt to create something, we overcreate and then fall to the other end of the spectrum.
Yes.
Right. And it's leading me to the last question that I want to throw here. And it is a layered one, so you can unpack it how you will.
Sure.
We've looked at these, like I said, the attributes of the traditional attributes of masculinity, emotions, all of this appearance and these things. But and as we've echoed in our conversation, it's not to say they're bad. They are not bad attributes, but rather I think what we've been saying is making those the standard of what then determines if a male is masculine or not is maybe the problem, but not the attributes itself, right? And over time, I was seeing a study was showing that there's been a decrease in masculinity in the traditional sense, meaning I'm the breadwinner at home, dominating the woman, physical appearance and masculine, all of that kind of stuff, all these that we've listed. We've seen a decrease in that and an increase in, I guess, for lack of a better phrases, being in touch with your feminine side, as you would sometimes say. Seeing men being more empathetic, being more emotional, being more compassionate, and taking on more of that gentler side, aspects of things that traditionally wouldn't be viewed as being masculine. And I think the question I would throw is to say then, from both sides, are there strengths we can draw from what society is viewing as a traditional masculine traits and characteristics, but then also, what do we say about a man being in such a feminine side? Is that something that we should be encouraging? And how do those dynamics, how do we maybe hope for them to play out in a perfect world?
There's so much that I would love to unpack and explore in pretty much what you've mentioned. But we won't necessarily for the sake of time. It's just so many interesting avenues to go down. So I think like several things that come to mind. To be honest, is one. It's that I think in a lot of respects, one can arguably say that I think as society, humankind, all that kind of stuff. Like I think we like to put people in boxes or categories, perhaps because it makes it easier for us to engage once we can define something a little bit more clearly. And so even the idea of masculinity perhaps is a product of that, right? Of the idea of trying to define something neatly so that we can engage with it a little bit easier or a little bit better, whatever, perhaps. The study that you talk about, I haven't read it, so I would be curious to know what came to that conclusion. How did they come to that conclusion? Because on one hand, I can see how that conclusion would make sense in that, again, because a lot of our history or what we tradition has defined it as X, Y, Z, this and that. I think
to say that was in the South African context.
okay, 100%. Okay, cool. Because then that was like my other question was like, I was like, I wonder, it depends where the study was done and which people were involved. But then at the same time, it's like, okay, if it's only concentrated in a particular space, what about, spaces outside of that that was focused upon? It's like, perhaps there were men that were a little bit more, that are exhibiting attributes, characteristics that were not the stereotype or the traditional sense in other pockets of the world. So I'm not saying that the study is wrong. That's why I'd actually love to read, to engage with it a little bit more. But I think the fact that maybe what's helpful in our day and age is because the world over time, I suppose, has become a lot more connected, and via travel and the internet, all that kind of stuff. There's maybe more opportunity for this sort of thing to be discussed and more people exposed to what's outside of their most immediate context, and as a result, the narrative has changed over time, right?
Yeah.
And consequently, then yes, maybe those quote unquote traditional or stereotypical things are on the decline in that perhaps more people are realizing, wait, I don't subscribe to this entire list or this box, therefore, and recognizing that there's so many other people who don't, therefore, this box is more of a concept than an idea than it actually is a reality. Therefore, does that box actually need to exist? And the whole time we're talking, I keep thinking about your opening definition of masculinity. It's like, well, then is there really a definition for masculinity? And it's not to say that there can't be objective truth. It's just to say, like, I think a lot of stuff that we try and define as purely this can be argued against. And as we've explored now, I say that the concept of masculinity, I think, is a little bit perhaps more complex as what might initially come to mind was historically the case. I'm saying a lot of things right now. So I think all of this is the backdrop to say that are there positives to these traditional views? I think so as well. I think it's a good thing to be able to be strong and to protect because you can do X, Y, and Z, right? So I think there are positives to those sorts of things. But then at the same time, I think if you are more emotional, for example, I think there is strength in that as well because in you embracing your emotion, one, you allow yourself to potentially work through things maybe in a moment that would allow you to grow as an individual or to heal in certain respects, that empower you, right, to be a better individual, slash that being witnessed by somebody else maybe gives them the ability to do the same, right? They don't need to hide aspects of who they are. So there's positives to a lot of things, but I think anything in an extreme can be a negative, right?
Yeah.
So everything, I suppose, in the right kind of moderation and define right, again, context is specific. I think one of the things which then for me becomes vital, I suppose, is or it's a for me maybe it's a given, is that I mentioned earlier being a person of faith, is that I think my objective frame of reference when it comes to what being a man is slash what is right and wrong is defined by God, right, and the Word. I think outside of that, if that doesn't exist, I think a question does become raised as to okay, but then what is an objective? Is there such a thing as an objective frame of reference?
Yes.
And that I think becomes a little bit harder to define because your truth is just your truth. It doesn't have to be mine. So I think within this concept of masculinity, outside of God being the one who molds and shapes this aspect of humanity, then I think it's become more free for all, and in that the spectrum becomes wider.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
I hear you. I hear that. One thing that is kind of standing out, and you like you spoke this one, just saying that with transport and internet and people engaging more, that could have potentially enhanced, and I agree to that. It could have also led to not necessarily saying it's a decline and an increase in the other side, but it's maybe people engaging more and starting to realize certain aspects. And what came to mind is looking at it in my context, getting out of your comfort zone, getting out of what has been your norm, and exposing yourself to other spaces, other cultures, other ethnicities, locations, whatever, it plays a huge role in just broadening your frame of reference, your worldview. You start to see other things that you were probably in your blind spots, right? And you can and it's very important just keeping an open mind and being willing to explore. Because what I've seen is that what hinders, I guess, growth in individuals in a group of people is being very comfortable in what you've known for so long and not being willing to open up to other things. For example, I think of this thought of when you, what really makes a great debate is that you have your views and your opinions that you trust, you have evidence to back it, and proof that you trust it so much is in you willing to table it and actually put it to the test and actually fish it out and another person has a opposing view.
Yes.
And what should be the result of that is that you come out of that conversation saying, I've reinforced what I believe in has been reinforced, or there's been some things that have been tested and maybe I'm coming out with a better knowledge. It's not to say I come out winning or losing, but I come out better in any case because it's either been reinforced what I said I believe in, I've reinforced it here, or there's been something added towards and another perspective that maybe that has been opened that I never had, right? And so again, bringing it to this context and this topic that you're speaking of, coming out of certain environments, because for me, one of the, like I was saying earlier, what was the starting point and what sparked this journey of mine of saying, well, I need to relook some of these things. The big motivator was the movement. I'm from KZN. And coming out of that, I always say to some friends, I'm like, I realize that I'm proud to be Zulu, and I feel like the Zulu people are just incredible people with such a rich history. But the realization of mine, this is my opinion, I feel like KZN lives in a bubble. Because KZN is predominantly Zulu people. And then you'd find some Xhosa people, and then the colors and the whites, yes, Indians. But in terms of the African, as far as African cultures go, it's predominantly Zulu. It is very seldom you run into a Sotho person or a Bedi. It's very seldom. Now, coming out of that environment, and mind you, that's the environment I've only known for 18 years of my life. I'm coming out to a new environment. It's the first time I'm coming to this kind of space. I only know it from TV or from a book to say this Swati, this baby, this Tswana, this Venda. I've never interacted with those people. Now coming into the space, I'm exposed to that. Johannesburg is so diverse. And so so many of the things that I understood and that I looked at as the norm, because that is the norm in KZN, I come here and I'm like, it's not the case. For example, I made this example in a conversation I had with Mike in our earlier episodes, is I remember very distinctly some female I was speaking to, I think it was on campus, we greet each other, and because of my background, I just come from that space. I'm like, you're black, you know, Zulu. I'm speaking to Zulu, and then they tell me they don't understand Zulu. To which my immediate response was, what kind of a black person are you who doesn't speak Zulu? Very presumptuous of me. So their response was, well, what kind of a black person doesn't speak Zulu? And I couldn't respond because now something has challenged, because it became a norm. It's something that's normalized within the Zulu people that you need to know Zulu.
Yes.
For some reason, every other culture within South Africa, all these different cultures, they need to know Zulu. It's like a fundamental.
Yes.
But for some reason, we, like the Zulus, are not expected to know Sotho, Bedi, Tswana, and all these other languages.
Yes.
But why is that? And so I came out of that conversation, there was a bit of embarrassment, and I was like, but yeah, why was I thinking like that? Why did I expect her to know Zulu, and there was no expectation for me to know her language?
Yes.
And then again, there was one of the things I had to work on. And so what I'm seeing is that coming out of your comfort zone, exposing yourself to other spaces, you know, more diverse people, having conversations, whether it's uncomfortable, whether the views are opposing, have the conversations, expose yourself to those spaces, and then you get to really see well, these thoughts that I subscribe to, maybe isn't what I thought it is. Maybe I've approached it in the wrong way. So I've just taken one approach and there's multiple approaches. And just because I believe in this one doesn't make these wrong. And that's something that I've really come to terms with. And so even with this, like to me, I look at it, I'm like, as you're saying, there's strengths to both. There's again being a man of faith, the Bible speaking of the man being the head, and wives submitting. There's a strength and there's a place for me in my home to be able to say, hey, we're gonna do this. This is the direction we're taking. And my wife and children being able to say, okay, yeah, you know, Ubaba would say, we're gonna go in this direction. And there's a space within my home, and it's healthy in that regard. But at the same time, there's a space where I can actually be able to be more vulnerable. I think it should be normalized in a household. For me personally, I'm okay, for example, to say my wife is earning a bigger check than I am. That shouldn't affect me. And if it is, to me, at least the way I'm looking at it, it's saying more about my ego and my pride. With this example, particularly of finances,
Yes.
because that's also been a very heavy pillar to say, no, the man must be the breadwinner, the man must be, the one who brings in the most in the household.
100%.
I know of people where it's the opposite.
100%.
And the household seems to be flourishing. I come from a household that was like that.
100%.
And it's flourishing with mom. So it looks like the problem is more on the male who has issue with that, and I think that requires and warrants introspection for that individual to say, why do I have trouble with this in this context? And there can be a whole host of things. It can be a pride issue. It can also be, you've seen something, so I've seen more examples where maybe the woman lords it over their husband, and now you come to then, you no longer obey that principle in the Bible of, hey, the husband is the head. So in what I'm saying of like, hey, just because you're making money doesn't make him now less of a head. But again, like, to say all of this to say, coming out of what you've known as a norm, exposing yourself to more things, you then realize that there are nuances to these things. There are many different. It's a wide spectrum. It's almost like also what the word, how we say, the more you dive into something, the more you realize you don't know. And I think already in this conversation, what we've been speaking of, I'm realizing how much more broad it is. And there's so much that can be explored within this topic. And so it's not just one route,
Yes.
but it is a route for an individual to say, this is what I subscribe to, and this is what is natural to me. But in that, I shouldn't then say, what is outside of that is this wrong, but it should be the case. I don't know if that answered it.
No, it does. Again, with what you said, there's opportunity to explore so much from a cultural aspect to that. Like you said, the introspection that resulted, why did I expect them to subscribe to my view?
Yeah.
So I completely agree with pretty much what you've been talking about, and then while at the same time as well recognizing let's double click on this. So what would this be? This point be? So I think to your point is to say, let's explore. Within community, I'd suggest let's have those questioning minds. To really seek to understand and to discover ourselves, and hopefully we can help one another right on this journey as we grow. And I think as individuals we continue to grow. So I guess maybe hopefully decide not to, but this is an interesting conversation I think to have. And I appreciate sitting and chatting with you about it as well. At least enjoyed it. Scratching the surface of this. Yes.
No, definitely, and it was really amazing. Look, I often end it off by asking my guests this one question, which is, what man are we becoming? So, as closing, was Mojo becoming?
I would hope I'm becoming the man God has already made me to be.
Yeah.
And by that, I suppose I mean God's made me. He knows who I am. And I would like to say that if I'm focused on Him, I am shedding everything that is false, that is the false self. Um, as he makes me aware, and as I give myself more into that process, right? And as I do, I'm becoming more who God has already made me to. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice. It's great.
We hope you enjoyed that episode and that you found it valuable and worth your time. Hey, and if you did so enjoy it, why don't you hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. And also, if you haven't shared it, share it to someone who you know will find this information very valuable. Hey, we have a goal and we'd love to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. And so we'd really appreciate it if you can assist with sharing the word and spreading the word out there. And we hope you'll be part of this journey. Also, drop a comment below. We read every single comment that is posted, and we would really love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. Your feedback is also very valuable and appreciated. It helps our team so that we can bring you even better content. And with that said, please rate our show wherever you are consuming us on whichever different platform. Thanks for being part of this journey. We appreciate you.